Emmanuel Haro has died, not been kidnapped. Just minutes ago, investigators presented evidence that will forever change the way this case is remembered. Evidence concerning the disappearance of Emmanuel Haro at the age of 7 months. An infant who was incapable of defending himself, running, or engaging in physical combat. The narrative rapidly acquired popularity upon its initial publication. A mother who is weeping. A father who is adamant about receiving responses. A family is claiming that an unknown individual abducted their infant from a parking lot during the day. The headlines elicited a feeling of powerlessness. Parking spaces are currently being searched by law enforcement personnel. Neighbors are sifting through the vegetation in the ravines. Volunteers held candles late into the night to advocate for Emmanuel's safe return. Conversely, the fissures expanded as time progressed. The stranger did not witness the assault. The camera did not capture any footage. Ailments that did not align with the narrative. This press release has now verified the absence of an abductor, which had been a source of concern for many individuals. No individual was ever enigmatic. Nevertheless, the evidence ultimately leads back to the individuals whom Emmanuel most trusted, his mother, Rebecca, and his father, Jake. The individuals who were intended to serve as his protectors evolved into his deadliest adversaries. The hands that were designed to soothe him to slumber are now being accused of terminating his brief existence. This is not merely an offense. It is an act of betrayal against the most sacred connection we possess, the bond between a parent and a child. As investigators present their findings, a question has been resonating louder than ever: how could the individuals who brought Emmanuel into this world also be the ones to remove him? Rebecca informed authorities that she had taken her infant son, Emmanuel, to a sporting goods store in Yucaipa, California, on the afternoon of August 14th. She stated that she parked the vehicle, stepped into the humid August air, and placed him on the rear seat to change his diaper. The asphalt had a shimmering appearance in the humidity. Vehicles entered and exited the parking lot. The routine of a parent was characterized by ordinary moments until, as she subsequently claimed, everything changed in an instant. Rebecca stated that a male approached her. A single word, Lola, was his greeting to her. She said that she had scarcely had the opportunity to react before he struck her. The world spun, she described, and then blackness. The sudden rush of agony was also described. Upon regaining consciousness, she discovered that her infant son was missing. Emmanuel's blanket was left crumpled on the floor, and the air, which had once carried the soft sobs of a child, now took only her screams. His car seat was empty. She made a hasty call to the authorities. Her voice broke as she informed them that her infant had been abducted. Officers responded promptly to the incident. The streets were filled with the sound of sirens. A sense of urgency, authenticity, and rawness characterized the initial moments. An entire community was mobilized by the sight of a young mother being attacked in broad daylight. Volunteers formed a line to search. Neighborhoods were blanketed with flyers featuring Emmanuel's visage. Yucaipa was the focus of the nation's attention. However, something was amiss even then. Witnesses who had been present in the parking lot stated that they had not observed a struggle. They had not heard a cry, a scuffle, or a collapse. Vehicles were observed entering and exiting the parking lot via surveillance cameras. Families are conducting their daily routines. However, Rebecca was unable to locate the enigmatic individual she had described. Her narrative, which was intended to elucidate the disappearance, began to destabilize as investigators examined it more closely. The cries of a mother, the heat of the asphalt, and the empty seat of an infant who was unable to defend himself. The picture that these details painted was haunting. But investigators began to detect the outlines of something else in the background, a narrative that did not align with the evidence, a truth that was awaiting discovery. The detectives made a concerning observation as they began to reconstruct the events of that day. The evidence did not support Rebecca's account of being struck unconscious. The bruises she identified were inconsistent, indistinct, and did not correspond to the violent assault she described. The medical personnel discreetly observed that the injuries appeared to be more self-inflicted than the result of an attacker. The story that surveillance footage, when examined frame by frame, told was distinct from Rebecca's words. The cameras captured footage of vehicles, families, and ordinary shoppers entering and exiting the lot. However, they did not capture a single image of the stranger she described. There was no sudden approach, no male hovering nearby, and no figure slipping away with a child in his arms. There was only stillness in the locations where Rebecca's account insisted that evidence should be present. Then, the interviews occurred. Rebecca and Jake both moved uncomfortably in their seats while being questioned. Their speech was shaky, and their tone was unsteady. The investigators reported nervous mirth at inappropriate times, vague recollections in situations where detail should have been sharp, and ultimately, refusal. Rebecca, who had previously requested assistance, ceased to cooperate. The desperation of bereaved parents was conspicuously absent. Detectives observed only guarded faces and evolving narratives in their stead. As they delved deeper, the darkness intensified. Jake's vehicle was confiscated. Investigators sought to uncover clues that could elucidate the circumstances surrounding the death of infant Emmanuel within the premises. Cadaver dogs were transported to the family's residence, where they were trained to detect objects that are invisible to human vision. The public was not prepared to hear the query that detectives were beginning to ask: was Emmanuel ever kidnapped? This chilling undertone permeated every step of the search. It appeared that his parents were engaged in a struggle to maintain a falsified narrative, rather than to bring their son home. The hours spent searching fields, the prayers murmured into the night, and the neighbors who left food and water for exhausted volunteers were all based on a story that investigators were now dismantling piece by piece. One thought persisted, and suspicion grew. Did Emmanuel's brief existence conclude before the commencement of the search? Was the nation in dire need of a child who, in reality, had never had an opportunity to be discovered alive? The investigation has reached its most catastrophic juncture today. Law enforcement has just issued a press release that has confirmed what many feared but hoped would never be true. Emmanuel Haro was not abducted. Rebecca and Jake, his parents, have been apprehended and formally accused of murder. The nation was captivated by the narrative of a stranger in a parking lot for weeks. However, investigators now assert that the narrative was merely a meticulously crafted illusion, intended to deceive and divert attention. Detectives uncovered evidence revealing the truth behind the curtain of public appeals for assistance. Traces of human decomposition were discovered in areas associated with the Haro family by forensic teams. Rebecca and Jake were located in locations that did not correspond with their sworn statements due to conflicting phone records. Search warrants indicate that objects that may have been associated with Emmanuel's final moments may have been intentionally concealed. The investigation drew closer to a disturbing truth as each discovery pushed it further from the narrative of an unknown kidnapper. Cold realities. Concrete substantiation. There is no enigmatic figure to pursue. No unfamiliar face can arouse anxiety. There was only a circle that was constricting around the two individuals who were supposed to be Emmanuel's initial line of defense. The parents who claimed to be victims are now being accused of being perpetrators. In the aftermath of this disclosure, the sheriff's office's statement is an unbearable burden. The search was never conducted in quest of a missing child. It was for the truth that was concealed beneath his parents' deceptions. The announcement took aback the community. For days, volunteers had searched abandoned lots, combed through ravines, and walked shoulder to shoulder in the scorching sun. They transported flashlights, water flasks, and optimism. A portion of the labor was avoided. Some parents left their children at home, under the impression that they were assisting in the return of another child. Consequently, they are now informed that the entire endeavor, including the perspiration, prayers, and sleepless nights, was founded on a fabrication, which was orchestrated by the very individuals who sought their assistance. The anger of Emmanuel's neighbors is the only emotion that can equal their grief. Small flames flickered against the night sky as candles were lighted on sidewalks just a week ago. Each one was intended to assist in the return of a missing infant. However, those same candles now serve as reminders of something far more devastating, that Emmanuel may never return at all. The betrayal is profoundly painful for investigators. Workforce hours. Resources worth thousands of dollars. Helicopters hover above. Cadaver canines were deployed. All for a narrative that was collapsing as it was being recounted. Detectives describe a combination of frustration and mourning. They signed up to pursue criminals, not anticipating deception by parents whose child's life was at risk. And then, another revelation occurred: Jake Haro's criminal record. An earlier conviction for juvenile cruelty. This history has recently resurfaced and is hauntingly relevant. What was the total number of warning indications that were disregarded? How many opportunities were overlooked to intervene before Emmanuel was placed in the care of an individual with such a history? These are questions that unsettle the public and force officials to seek answers. Parents are intended to serve as protectors, custodians, and a secure haven from the perils of the world. However, in this instance, the threat did not originate from external sources. It originated from within the confines of the residence. The greatest peril to Emmanuel was not a stranger lurking in the shadows. He should have been protected by the two individuals who should have exerted the most effort. This case was never about a stranger in the night. It was never about a predator lurking in a parking lot or a mysterious figure slipping past cameras. It was about internal betrayal. It was about the rupture of a bond that was intended to be impenetrable. It was about the hands that were designed to cradle an infant but instead were accused of ending his life. The world was in a hurry to accept the heroes. Because who would challenge a mother who was weeping for her baby? Who would question the authority of a father who is seeking answers? We aimed to instill confidence in them. We desired to accept their narrative because the alternative was too dreadful to contemplate. However, the disguise is receding with each new piece of evidence. Consequently, the image that remains is not that of parents who are fervently seeking their child, but instead of parents who are fervently seeking to protect themselves from accountability. The community mourns Emmanuel. However, there is a quiet acknowledgement that danger does not always come from the places we fear, which reflects a sentiment that is deeper than grief. Occasionally, it originates from the place where we feel most secure. Occasionally, the threat is not posed by an outsider but rather by the very individuals who are entrusted with the responsibility of affection and protection. If the limbs that should be comforted can instead be destroyed, if trust itself can be weaponized, how can we ever protect the most innocent among us? What is the most effective method for protecting children when the most significant threat is not occurring outside of their household but rather within it? These are the inquiries that Emmanuel's case compels us to address, questions that are difficult to answer but with repercussions that we cannot disregard. Therefore, the narrative of Emmanuel cannot conclude at this point. His brief existence is deserving of more than mere obscurity, as it is incorporated into yet another headline. His memory must remain a cautionary tale, a call to vigilance, and a reminder that the truth can be concealed by the most unexpected of appearances. We will continue to monitor every development, courtroom update, and piece of evidence that emerges, as Emmanuel's narrative is of paramount importance. Because his truth deserves to be disclosed, and his name deserves to be commemorated. Therefore, if you wish to remain informed about the progress of this case, please subscribe and enable notifications. This is not about clicks or statistics, it is about ensuring that every child has a voice, especially since Emmanuel Haro no longer has one. We are obligated to continue to heed him. We are responsible for him for continuing to communicate the truth to prevent it from being suppressed again.